You can listen to the Canadian Gothic early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to Canadian Gothic.
Hello, listeners. In tonight's episode of the Canadian Gothic, we're going to be exploring the tragic legacy that haunts the family of the two guests that will soon be joining us. It starts just over 50 years ago, back in 1975. Then 20-year-old Jane Smith was living in Sudbury, Ontario, and attending Laurentian University. When the school year wrapped for summer break, she decided to stick it out in the city and pick up as many hours as she could while working at Canadian Tire. From all accounts, she was enjoying her time in Sudbury that summer. She had everything a 20-year-old could want: an apartment, roommates, a boyfriend, a busy social life. But there was also something terrible there. In the early morning hours of August 9th, something happened. Jane vanished without a trace, and despite the passage of over 50 years, her case has remained unsolved. In fact, it's almost more than unsolved. There seems to be absolutely nothing that even suggests a direction to begin looking. But we're going to try tonight. In this episode of the Canadian Gothic, we'll explore not only what is known about Jane's disappearance, but also the profound and lasting impact it has on the people who love her. To start, I'll be joined by Jane's younger brother, John Smith, who will share what it was like to lose his sister and how the decades of uncertainty has affected his family. And once John sets the scene for us, we'll move on a generation to John's daughter Katie, who's devoted herself to investigating Jane's disappearance and speaking publicly with the purpose of keeping her memory alive. So let's get into it. Tonight, in this episode of the Canadian Gothic, we'll be discussing the disappearance of Jane Smith.
I retired from de Havilland. I was a hydraulic mechanic for 31 years. 59, I had a few health problems, so I decided to retire. Other than that, my pretty ordinary life. I've been married since 1979. I have two girls, 42 and 40.
Now, what's bringing us together is the story of your sister, Jane. Why don't you introduce her? Tell me a bit about Jane, a bit about your childhood and life together. Just tell me what your like, just to start, your memories of growing up with Jane.
Well, my parents divorced very early. We were all quite young. There was three of us, Jane being the oldest, then me. I'm 2 years younger than Jane, and then my brother, Dave, he's a year younger than I am. They were divorced in the early 60s. I don't even think I was in grade school yet when that happened. So we lived apart for the most part when we were quite young. We used to see each other at least twice a year. Our family had a cottage, and we'd always spend a week there in the summer with her, and usually at Christmas time. And as we got older, we wrote letters a little bit. Not much. I mean, teens, when it comes to corresponding with, so it was it was pretty much hit and miss a lot. But I mean, we still continued to see each other a couple times a year until I was older. Once I got my driver's license, we were able to be a lot closer. We'd go out and visit quite a bit.
Yeah, when you think of Jane as a young woman, like a lot of what we're going to be talking about is after she moved to Sudbury to attend school, which would have been around, like she's probably around like 18 or 19 at that point in her life when she left.
She would have been 19, I think. So she would have been 20 in the late March of that year.
What brought her to, like, what was she going there to? She went to Sudbury to go to school. What was her plan with, what was she doing in school?
She went to Sudbury to study social work. That was right up her alley. I mean, she was always somebody who was involved. She always wanted to be, if not in charge, then doing something to help. That's why Laurentian and social work appealed to her.
Were you in touch with her often when she was there? And did you know what her life was like what she was doing in Sudbury outside of school?
Well, she did a lot. She was on the student council there her first year. There was that. I think she had a pretty busy social life, but it seems like she knew an awful lot of people.
She was working as well, right?
She did. She took a job at Canadian Tire during the summer as she was staying in Sudbury. She didn't come home from Sudbury.
Okay, so like when the school year ended, rather than come home for the summer, she stayed in Sudbury, got a job at Canadian Tire.
Yeah, At Canadian Tire, yeah.
So when she's in Sudbury working, planning to spend the summer there, w- w- I'm sure that life at that point would have been a little different than, school time when she probably had her nose in the books. Did you know much about her life in Sudbury, like other than maybe the odd phone call? Like, did you ever visit or anything like that?
Yeah, yeah, well, phone call and a few letters, but yes, I did visit. Actually, it was the last time that I saw Jane. It was, I believe it was a long weekend in May, and I just drove up to Sudbury on a whim on the Saturday morning or Sunday morning, I think, just to go and visit her unannounced, and just went up and knocked on the door, and she had two friends visiting her from Aurora, staying there, and we all went out for lunch, had a nice day, and um, but yeah, that was just a total just on a whim, and that was the last time that I saw her.
Where were you in the summer of '75 when she was working in Canadian Tire?
We had a small farm and we raised beef cattle, and that's where I was in Queensville. I just remember my mom and my stepdad Eric coming out to the farm to tell us that she had gone missing, and they were talking to my dad about raising money for a reward.
Okay. What is your memory of your memories of learning that she went missing? So I'm imagining you're just doing your thing and they just lay it on you like that. Do you have any other memories of learning that something was happening with Jane?
Well, I remember a fair number of things, but some of them about that time, it's all sort of blurry. We did go up to Sudbury a couple times. Once I think we met some friends of hers probably a week after she went missing, and we did some walking through parts of Sudbury, and like out near the mines and things like that. Just there was a whole bunch of people that went out. And I don't recall who organized it. It might have been organized by the police. It might have been organized by my parents.
Yeah, because we are talking about something that happened 50 years ago, but it's something that must have just rocked your family. Do you have memories of the effect this had on your mother, your father, your younger brother? And are you even able to remember a time like before this? Like I'm just thinking when you think of something this big that happened 50 years ago, I feel like it would almost be hard to think about life without having, the shadow of Jane's disappearance cast over you.
It's always it's always been in the back of my mind, and what triggers it could be anything that triggers a memory. It's you hear that they found a body somewhere, or on the news another person is missing, and then so it just anytime that comes up, it just brings back memories of her. And uh, I wish I could say they were all great memories, but it's sometimes it makes me feel it's very hard for me. I didn't know how much I missed her until she was gone.
Talk a bit about your how you saw your parents dealing with this.
Uh, my mom hardly ever talks about it. Very, very, very little. She's 91 and lives with me now, and we never discussed Jane. It would just it's not good. It's really torn her apart. Um,
Mhm.
she can't even I could never have a friend named Jane or things like that.
It's
That's
that
how
that
sensitive.
intense. Mhm.
Yeah, that's how sensitive it is.
Like when you think back over the last 50 years, has it always been that way? Like, was there a time when your mom and you would talk about Jane and what may have happened, or has this been something where it's like almost like a memory that has to be put away?
Well, it's like a memory that has to be put away. Shortly after Jane disappeared, I would say like 1977, I believe. My parents were transferred down to the States. They worked in Illinois. When they were down in the States, I think that was the escape they needed um, to get away from it. They her room was never touched. It stayed that way and until they packed it up like a couple years later when they were transferred. So that's, the room was at the end of the hall with the door closed, and I never opened it. It's just
Wow.
that's the way it was. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about for you as a younger brother, her younger brother living with this over the last 50 years? Like even now, again, 50 years later, I can see that you have a hard time putting it to words. But how would you say having an older sister go missing with no explanation for what happened, how has this affected your life? What changes do you think, or what parts of your personality at this point are a result of having dealt with this 50 years ago?
Well, I think I'm a lot more cautious with my girls when they were younger. I always wanted to know where they were and what they were doing, probably to their annoyance, for the most part. But it's the not knowing that's
Mhm.
that's the worst part, and it's I'm just having trouble putting it into words how much it plays on you. When I think of her, it's always just hard. It
Mhm.
really is. But the amount of people that have contacted us that knew Jane and would tell us and have told us stories and about what she was like, and it just makes me feel even more that what she could have done as a social worker working with people, children. I think that's the one of the biggest losses for us is as to what she would have achieved, and I'm sure she would have achieved some great things. Cheated isn't the right word to use. I feel, yeah, maybe cheated is the right word to use. I feel that I was cheated out of a lifetime with somebody who would have been special.
Yeah. So you've already mentioned you have two daughters. My understanding is that this story doesn't stop with you. It's affected your mother's life, it's affected your life, but it seems now that one of your daughters specifically, Katie, seems to be the one who's almost like taking the lead on trying to understand what happened to Jane and speaking for the family as well. Like I've seen her in news reports about the 50th anniversary of Jane's disappearance. What is it like for you as the father to see now your adult daughter carrying the torch of dealing with the tragedy that's affected your family like this?
I'm glad that she's taken an interest in her Aunt Jane, and really, Katie didn't even know that she existed until she was probably about 12 or 14, I think, maybe
Wow. Okay.
something something like that. That's how little that we spoke of it, and I didn't want to answer a lot of questions when they were younger. It was better for me not to have to explain something that I couldn't explain, and why it was so difficult. With her taking the interest that she has in the case, um, you know, a couple of, no, I guess it's 6 or 7 years ago now, I got a call from the Sudbury police asking me if I would give a DNA sample, which I did, only to find out later it was my daughter Katie who had contacted the police and told them to request that.
And
So
set that in motion. Wow. Last question for you is I understand the effect that this could have on yourself, your family. I can understand the, um, I guess, positive feelings that some progress being made could have, specifically seeing your daughter Katie getting the wheels moving, just as you just described. But how important is it for you to see an explanation for what happened to Jane and get justice if appropriate? Like at this point in your life, with 50 years of this behind you,
uh,
is that your goal to have an explanation and justice?
an explanation. Uh, Justice, I don't know what's justice now. If there is a person, they've carried this for 50 years as well. That's probably punishment enough. I'd like, I've talked with Katie about this numerous times. We're both of the opinion that if somebody would just say something, just tell us.
Just want to know.
We just want to know. And if they're, and I don't really care about the consequences anymore. Uh, 20, 30 years ago, I didn't feel that way, but now I don't see the point. Probably the person who is responsible for this is in their 70s with a family of their own, and what would do to them.
Mm.
Um, some mistakes you can't correct anyway. So what is the point of ruining another family's lives to uh, if somebody would just anonymously say this is what happened and this is where she is, that would be enough for me at this point.
Speaking with John, it's impossible to not feel the weight of what 50 years of unanswered questions has done to his family. It's a wound that has never healed. But over the decades, those closest to Jane seem to have carried their grief privately, holding tightly to her memory while avoiding the pain of speaking about it, even amongst their loved ones. But for the next generation of this family, the experience is different, as you're soon going to hear. John's daughter Katie never knew her Aunt Jane, and that distance affords a kind of freedom. Rather than sealing Jane's story away as a painful chapter best left unopened, Katie has chosen to confront it head on. She's become the voice her family couldn't always bring themselves to be. Katie's been researching Jane's case, speaking out publicly, and pushing for answers before the passage of time makes the truth even further out of reach. So let's move our conversation forth one generation and speak with John's daughter, Katie. Your dad, John, told us a lot about you, but why don't you tell us about you?
Yeah, so I'm Katie Smith. I am Jane Smith's niece, and John Smith is my dad. I was born in 1984. I know I should put my age on the internet, but I never got to meet my Aunt Jane. She went missing in August of 1975, so I was born about 9 years after she had gone missing.
Do you have any memories of, as a child, like knowing that something had happened or seeing any hints that there was some kind of tragedy amongst your dad's family or amongst your family?
Honestly, not really. My family's way of dealing with things is to not talk about it, and sort of burying it makes it easier and more bearable, is what I'll say. My grandmother did treat my sister not better than me, but she was definitely her favorite growing up. And looking at pictures of Jane, once I knew about her, they do have a striking resemblance to each other. And I do think that my sister probably looks a lot like what Jane would have or should have looked like if she got the opportunity.
Wow. Well, tell me how you first learned about Jane. Like, I understand it wasn't until you were like a teenager before you even learned that this had happened.
Yeah. So I probably was 15, 16 when my dad finally told me about Jane. I found a Bible with her name scribbled in the front page, and I was like, well, who is this? And I think that's really how the conversation happened. He didn't tell me much. It was hard for him because he didn't have any answers. So it's one thing to be able to tell you that my sister went missing, but he couldn't tell me anything more than that. And I think that was really hard for him. So when he initially told me, I was a teenager, but we didn't talk about it again really well till I was in my 20s.
And other than, like, it's one thing when you and your dad in private sit and have this very brief chat about what had happened, but even before your 20s, did you speak to anyone else in your family about it? Because I understand from talking to your dad that, like, your grandmother wouldn't even broach the topic. Like, did you bring it up with anyone else?
I've talked to a bit with my mom. My mom never met Jane either, so she didn't know much, but she knew a bit more than I did. But no, we never discussed it with my grandmother. It's just too painful for her.
Yeah. So it was kind of like almost like a tragic secret, or it was just this unspoken tragedy. I can't help but think it'd be like this like dark elephant in the room anytime the family got together after I knew that this had happened. I'm like you, I'm a very curious person, so it would pain me to not be able to talk to people about it. Now, you said it wasn't until you were around 20 that you started to dig into Jane's story. Tell me about that. Tell me about like your first steps of stepping out of, I guess, like the cone of silence to try to learn more. How did that happen? What did you do?
Yeah, so basically just the internet really was the place that we went. I mean, it is surprisingly difficult when your dad's name is John and your aunt's name is Jane to find information on the internet.
Smith, John and Jane Smith.
Jane Smith, yeah. I used to tell people we were in the witness protection program.
Yeah, you Google like John and Jane Smith, and Google just like laughs back at you. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. They're like, okay, yeah, maybe
And
try a bit more search.
Yeah. And then on top of that, this is something that happened 50 years ago, pre-internet, so it's that much harder.
And honestly, from what I can tell and what I've been able to gather, even I've talked to one of the libraries down in Sudbury. They went through all their microfiche. There really wasn't much coverage of this at all.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so not only is her name Jane Smith, but it just didn't seem to actually get any sort of coverage or hold in the news.
Yeah, that's one thing that surprised me. And before our talk today, I went through any kind of news reports that I could get my hands on, and it was everything was very brief in terms of the news reports. Even you even have copies of like school newspapers and such with even with something like a missing person, you would think that would be, the town or the city would shut down as this all happened. But even in the school newspaper, there's just, a brief mention about like a benefit dance, and then another mention about how disappointed people were that not many people showed up at the benefit dance. Like, was this like, tell me about the stuff you were finding about Jane as you were going through either the internet or your public archives or library.
Yeah, it's a bit unsettling to realize that this happened and that nobody really seemed to not to care, because obviously people did care, but it just seems like the public response was not one of caring that this had happened or concerned that this had happened.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember reading that it was the morality division of the police who were investigating, which, I mean, I'm not from the 70s. I don't really know what that means, but like there's implications in 2020 that probably aren't what they are, but it just makes you wonder, especially when you know that like pretty much any newspaper article is just recycled the same facts over and over again. It's never anything new. It's never anything more than straight facts. Like you read it, it just reads like Jane, this date, this time, this is what she was wearing. Done. No personality, nothing about Jane, just the cold facts of what had happened.
But despite that, you have been able to put together quite a bit of information as well as connect with people close to Jane or people that knew Jane back at the time she went missing. So how did it turn from you reading a couple newspapers that didn't have much information to it getting to the point where you're like finding people who actually knew her?
Yeah, so I think really what it was, the impetus for all of it, is the fact that it was her 50th anniversary. I think myself and my dad independently sort of started to realize that this is sort of the last hurrah, right? 50 years is something that maybe would make it in the news. 51 years, probably not. 52, probably not. And the people who know something and knew Jane and knew something about the disappearance are going to be in their 70s likely. So there's not much time to keep going. So independently, I'd written an article that I was trying to get published, and my dad had reached out to a family friend who's been really, really helping drive all of this.
And so you were writing this art, and how did this article lead to coverage on the anniversary, on the 50th anniversary?
Yeah, so I had sent it to my dad. I like to write whenever I have big feelings, I like to write, get it out on paper. It helps me sort of resolve and sort of work through my own feelings. So I had sent it to my dad, and he had said that he was also trying to look into things and thought it would make a good news article. So I sent it to a bunch of outlets just to see if there would be any interest in either publishing the story or talking to us. And the CBC thankfully got back to us and said they'd be willing to do a news story. Wow.
It's because you hear as like someone on the outside, you see on the news, the 10th anniversary of this case, the 25th anniversary. And I often think like it's just the news, like a convenient time for the news to retell a story. But hearing you talk and thinking about your family's story, this 50th anniversary is like the springboard that kind of represents the launching point into your kind of, as you put it there, the last hurrah, your last chance. Again, because by the time the next big anniversary comes up, the 60th, the 70th, 75th, there's a much higher chance that people close to Jane's disappearance would not be here anymore, if they're even still here now, 50 years later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about the timeline surrounding Jane's disappearance, and I guess we can start right with her time living in Sudbury. Can you tell me just what you've learned about her life, who she was connected to, what she was doing there? Try to best you can paint a picture of life for her in the lead up to her disappearance.
Yeah, so it was Jane's first year of university. She was studying to become a social worker. From everything that we've heard from friends that we've talked to and people who are close to her, she seemed to really have wanted to make a difference in the world. Just sort of the upsetting part is that that never got to happen, as far as we know. So, um, but so this was her first year. She didn't come home for the summer. She wanted to stay at Laurentian because she had a boyfriend and a part-time job that she really liked. So she wanted to stay up for the summer. And she was working at the Canadian Tire locally. And that's unfortunately when this happened, was the first summer of her first year of university.
And now, through the articles that I've read, I've found a bit of inconsistencies with the timeline of the actual last known day. And I know that's something you've tried to work out, is where she was last seen and who she was last seen by. So can you kind of tell me about Jane's last known moments and the events immediately leading up to her disappearance?
Yeah, so as far as we've been able to figure out, it looks like Friday during the day, she had worked a shift at her Canadian Tire job, was dropped off at home. Her boyfriend at the time worked at a bar, I believe, or somewhere locally. And so after his shift, as was sort of their routine, he came over to see her. I believe that was between midnight and 1 a.m. He stayed for a short period of time, went home. All of the news articles that we've been able to find have mentioned that her roommate saw her at 2 a.m. We really would like to speak to that roommate if she's still out there, just to get her side of the story, because from what the boyfriend has said to us, the roommate was likely asleep. So we're not sure if she did see Jane that night, if she didn't see Jane that night. What happened in the morning. All of the news articles say that the roommate was the one that noticed she was missing at 7 the next morning. So that would be Saturday morning. But we don't know if she simply got up to go about her day and she just assumed Jane was still sleeping and then left for the day, or when she got up, was Jane actually not there? Did she notice that Jane actually wasn't home? We just simply don't know.
Yeah, this brings up two questions for me. One is, 50 years later, I would think that what harm is there in the police not just giving you their records to be like, this is what we figured out back then. Like a case that's gone this like cold, so to speak, this much further, if they're not actively pursuing things, and we'll talk about whether or not we think they are. I wish they could give you and the people who are actually like fighting to figure out what happened access to these things, because I'm sure like going through whether or not there's transcripts or even just like hand notes from statements they would have taken back when she, days after she went missing, that would be so important to have at this point.
Absolutely. We're wondering the same thing. We're really hoping that we'll be able to work with them closer in order to get some of this information, because I mean, you're not wrong. Unless somebody comes forward, I don't see how we get closure. So it's not an active investigation in that. I highly doubt there will be quote unquote justice, whatever that is for some people.
Yeah. And even aside from that, for something that's happened this long ago, it's going to take just someone spilling the beans. I don't think it's like going to be traditional police work that's going to solve it. But no. The other thing that what you just said brought up is you mentioned talking to her then boyfriend. So now 50 years later, you've been able to track down Jane's boyfriend at the time of her disappearance. How did that happen? And how did he respond to getting a phone call or email or whatever it was from like, I'm Jane's niece trying to figure out what happened?
Yeah, so we got really lucky. He had seen the coverage in the CBC. He saw the article that the CBC wrote, and he actually reached out to us. It was wonderful. Yeah.
So it worked, what you and your dad kind of plan. That's pretty wild. So how did
It
he,
is.
without giving too much personal stuff, how did he reach out? What did he say? Like, tell me about that, because that's a special moment.
It was really nice to speak to him. It was nice for my dad to speak with him because he does sort of remember a lot about what happened in the aftermath and sort of meeting her boyfriend at the time and just talking with him. So it was nice for them to get to chat about Jane, and he was very kind and reaching out to us and talking to us about Jane, what she was like, sort of what he remembered. Yeah, it was really nice to talk to somebody who was that close to her, especially that close to when she had gone missing.
I can't imagine how he felt when he saw this on the news and taking the steps to contact you and connect with your dad and everything. That's a
I would imagine it was much like the goosebumps that I got when I was at work and I got that email, and I was like, wait a minute, I know this person's name.
which email?
From the CDC saying that he had reached out. They gave me his contact information.
So that's how it happened. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But we only knew his name, so when I saw the name pop up on the email, it was very shocking.
You've mentioned you've been unable to find a lot of like in-depth reporting on Jane's disappearance, but did you find anything related to any kind of searching or searches, like, or investigation? Because when you hear of this, something like this now, if a young woman goes missing in 2025, there are civilian searches. People are, there's a Facebook page, all this stuff is happening. Do you have any idea how they handled this 50 years ago?
So we don't really. I will say the only thing that we have been able to learn, and this is not just from my dad, but from a newspaper article that I did find, was that my grandmother and Jane's father had put up reward money, and there was that dance that was also trying to help with reward. But from what I can tell, there wasn't much of a search. But again, this is looking back 50 years on, so we really don't have much of an idea about how this was handled, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mentioned briefly the dance that was held to raise money for the reward. You know about the dance and kind of like the fallout after it through things that were written in like a school newspaper. Can you tell me about that? Like what you found? What's the story with this dance?
Yeah, so it was held, I believe it was in October, if I'm remembering correctly. And from the news article that we found in the Laurentian newspaper, it was basically somebody who was in the social work class with Jane, sort of admonishing people for how poorly attended the dance was. But that is one person's perspective, and I'm guessing if somebody is willing to write an article into the newspaper that it was poorly attended.
Yeah. I've never seen anything I've seen a copy of this post dance letter in the newspaper. I've just never seen anything like that before. It just seems like it's from such a different time, and I guess it was like 50 years. Turns out that was a different world back then.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, at any point from Jane's disappearance to present, was there ever like developments, or was there ever a feeling that something was about to happen? Like often in a story like this, there's these moments where it gets close and then it's just the rug's pulled out from underneath your family. Do you have any stories like that?
No, it was never close. There was never any progress that we have ever been made aware of. There was one story that I'll share that is really difficult for me to actually talk about. So I was saying how my grandmother doesn't really ever speak about Jane. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to or can imagine how difficult this has been for my dad, but my grandma, right? So we had come home from being out for the day, and when we got back, there was a message on her machine from the Sudbury police asking that she give them a call. It really, really upset her when she got that call. My grandmother doesn't cry really, but I remember she was crying, and She said that she had hoped that they found her. Um, they didn't. They were calling to see whether they could put Jane's information up on their website as a historical missing person. Um, but it was really heartbreaking, and it just makes you wonder what somebody must have gone through as a mother to hope that they found your daughter's remains,
Yeah.
basically.
And just seeing like that number or whatever on the phone, it brought her emotionally right to that moment. And for it to just be this procedural little thing, yeah, like when I was asking that question, I was expecting, there was this time or there was this suspect, but it turned out it was a misunderstanding. No, for your grandmother, it was a phone call from the police that brought her to that point and gave her those same kind of feelings, and that is heartbreaking. And as
Mm-hmm.
someone who, like both you as well as your father have said that your grandmother doesn't go there, doesn't approach the topic at all, that call made her or forced her at least within that moment, and that is so sad that for 50 years she's lived with that. And as a parent myself, I don't even want to try to think about how that would feel.
And we're really hoping that it has been 50 years, that people have grown up, had families that maybe know something and sort of can try and put themselves in my dad and my grandmother's shoes, and really think about what they know, and hopefully come forward, either call Crime Stoppers completely anonymous, and just let us know what you know. We need resolution to this. So
Yeah.
we're really hopeful that that sort of is something that they can think about as well.
Yeah. And your dad had made it clear that he's not interested in like quote unquote justice. What he's interested in is getting an answer and bringing Jane to rest in a respectful way. What are your thoughts on it? Like, because your dad has been living with this for 50 years, you not as much. Do you feel the same way as him?
So me and my dad have talked extensively about this, just especially recently. So really, when we talk, my stance and my dad's as well is that our family has been destroyed and victimized by this. We're not interested in doing that to somebody else's family. At this point, it's been 50 years. Somebody had to live with this for 50 years with what they've done. I think that's punishment enough, and we're not interested in punishing somebody's family and making them sort of reevaluate what they know about their father, their grandfather, their loved one. I'm not interested in that. There's no justice in that. It's
Hmm.
been 50 years. I think that's enough.
Yeah.
We just want Jane home, and we just want answers about what happened.
Hmm. And in Jane's story, it's hard to even speculate or theorize on what may have happened because there's so little known. But is there any like theory or suspects or leads or anything, or is at this point, as far as we know, sometime after her boyfriend visited, she went missing and wasn't noticed and that wasn't realized until the next morning when her roommate saw her, based on what we figured out through articles. Like, is there any more to it?
That's pretty much it, honestly. We don't know anything else. What I believe, what we've sort of been able to piece together is she did not show up for her shift at Canadian Tire. And sort of that's when somebody went to go pick her up, sort of when they sort of put the pieces together, because obviously waking up and your roommate not being home is not cause for concern, but
Hmm.
not showing up to her job was very unlike Jane. And so that's sort of when the alarm bells started to go off.
Hmm.
And she was reported missing to the police that evening, from what we've been told.
Hmm.
We've also sort of been told that not that they didn't take it seriously, but obviously this was a 20-something-year-old woman who was missing for probably at this point less than 24 hours. So it
Yeah.
wasn't until my grandmother could make it up. I believe we don't even really know when that happened, sort of timeline wise. I think probably Monday. So this would have been Saturday or Sunday that they noticed she was missing, and either I think Sunday or Monday, my grandmother actually made the 4-hour trip up to Sudbury, and that's when they actually sort of launched the investigation, which is obviously we do know that 48 hours is key.
Mhm.
So it doesn't seem like much in the way of an investigation was undertaken
Yeah.
until that time.
And I think that's why what you're doing now is so important, where you're trying to reconnect with people that may have some information or may have been connected to Jane in some way. Your dad spoke about that as well. You've already mentioned this idea of connecting with someone like Jane's roommate specifically. Do you want to call, like, is there any people that you want to hear from or you would like this passed on to? Because I'm sure there are listeners of my show in the Sudbury area that may have a connection to somebody.
Yeah, really. Like we were talking about, the roommate would be wonderful. It would help fill in a lot of missing pieces and questions that we have. But just in addition to that, anybody who knew Jane had some stories they would like to share. Any piece of information, as we all know, it's not even sort of about getting a resolution to her case so much as it is a lot of the times it's just nice to hear people's memories of Jane. I think my dad, because this wasn't talked about, sort of had the idea that Jane was completely forgotten, which based on the news articles and the coverage, I can understand the feeling. And we do not live anywhere near Sudbury, so we're very geographically detached from where this happened. But just, I think what's been nice for my dad is just hearing the stories, hearing that Jane wasn't forgotten. Like, she was very well remembered by a lot of people, and just sort of hearing stories about what she was like, because my dad wasn't able to grow up with Jane. His parents got divorced when he was very, very young. Jane was 2 years older than him. And so he didn't get to grow up with Jane. He grew up with his dad, and Jane grew up with his mom. So he saw her for a week during the summer, a week around Christmas. But when she had moved to Laurentian, he had gone up and visited her probably a month or two before she had went missing. And I just think about even me and my sister were never close growing up because we're very different people. As we grew into adults, we became a lot closer, and my dad was really robbed of that opportunity. So hearing stories about what Jane was like has been very therapeutic for him.
Mm-hmm. And you do have an email set up for anyone who has any information or any connection to the story. I'll give it on air now. It's findjanesmith1975@gmail.com. We've mentioned the roommate. Are you able to give her name, or out of respect for her, is that why you're just saying the roommate and not her name? Or
Yeah, just out of respect.
okay.
We're just saying the roommate. I believe her name was known to most people who are close to the case. What we don't want to do is just respectfully, we don't want people to be harassing her online. We would really like, hopefully, maybe a friend of hers who knows her to reach out to her and not sort of put her information out there.
So this isn't so much a call out to all the people on the internet to find this roommate.
Correct.
You're calling out the person you want to hear that is someone who knows who the roommate is and will pass that email along or whatever. So
Correct, yeah.
If you're out there and you know who the roommate is, that message was for you. Is that a good way to put it?
Yes, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, one last thing to talk about is we've discussed the police, their investigation, whether or not it's still being worked on. I'm sure you and your family have been in touch with police, at least in the last 5 or 10 years. Give me a sense on what the status of either the case or your family's relationship with the investigators is at this point.
Yeah, so we reached out prior to the 50th to try and get the Sudbury Police to also put out a statement. We didn't hear back from them. We've continued to follow up with them, and we are meeting with them soon. So we're hopeful that we'll get a bit of traction that way. About, I would say, probably 10 years ago, I did reach out to investigators because I was reading online about the advancements in DNA and a registry that the RCMP was putting together for missing people to sort of match people up with unidentified remains, which I'm sure people would be horrified to realize how many unidentified remains are out there.
Mm-hmm.
And they did take a DNA sample from my father. But we're unsure if that was actually put in the RCMP database. It's a question that we do want to talk to the police about just to make sure that that's happened.
Last question for you. You've mentioned that it's not so much about justice, it's an answer and a resolution for your family. Do you have, like, in terms of hope that this will be solved, like, what are your feelings at this point? Like, do you think this is going to have an end?
I think that this is definitely quote unquote solvable. Really, our solve is knowing what happened and where she is. We want her home where she belongs. But I do believe that the thing that is going to solve this is somebody listening, hearing what we're saying, and reaching out and telling us what they know. We all know that nobody lives in a silo. Somebody knows something. It's not just the person who maybe committed this crime or knows where Jane went. It's not just that person. That person has told somebody down the line something. So we're hopeful that I think that's the way that this is going to get some resolution for our family, is if somebody hears this, thinks about their own family and what this would mean to them, and comes forward and says something.
I want to thank you for joining John, Katie, and I for this discussion. If any one of you listening has any kind of connection to Jane, her life in Sudbury, or that roommate that Katie decided specifically not to name out of respect, please contact Katie and Jane's advocates at findjanesmith1975@gmail.com. Jane's family, as you heard them say themselves, simply want an explanation to her disappearance, and I think they deserve at least that. And with all that said, I'm going to start wrapping this episode up, but before I do, I want to end with some thanks. First, a big thanks to John and Katie for sharing their story with me and with you, the listeners of the Canadian Gothic. I'd also like to thank Aaron G., who helped make this episode happen. I'd like to thank LJ from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides our outro and intro voiceovers, and Monty Data, who provides the music for this show. And then lastly, but most importantly, a massive thank you goes out to each and every one of you listening, as without your interest and your support, the Canadian Gothic would be as pointless as it would be impossible. And on the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed. Irma, Kirsten, and Claire, thank you for going premium. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can do it in a variety of ways. First of all, the premium feed subscription costs just a couple bucks a month, and that money will fund the creation of new episodes. But the premium feed will also give you those episodes 2 days early, give them to you ad-free, and give you access to a full back catalog of episodes. You can go premium at thecanadiangothic.com/subscribe. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still support the show by sharing this episode on social media and letting all your like-minded friends know that you listen. Your support is very much appreciated. And until next time, take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let us know if you see anything weird.
Thank you for listening to Canadian Gothic.